Hello, and welcome to History at Bedtime. Somewhere in the 2nd century BCE, a Chinese envoy named Zhang Qian rode west from the Han Empire and entered a world his court had only partly imagined. He did not set out as a merchant. He was not searching for spices, jewels, or stories to entertain future generations. He was sent on a mission of politics and war. The Han Emperor wanted allies against the Xiongnu, the powerful confederation of the northern steppe whose cavalry had made the frontier of China dangerous for generations. Zhang Qian was expected to cross the western regions, find the Yuezhi people who had once been driven away by the Xiongnu, and persuade them to join China in a common campaign. The mission failed in its original purpose. Zhang Qian was captured. He spent years among the Xiongnu. He escaped. He continued west. He reached the rich lands of Central Asia, saw the kingdom of Deyuan in the Fergana Valley, heard of Bactria and Parthia, learned that Chinese silk was already reaching distant markets through hands he had never seen, and returned to the Han court with something more enduring than an alliance. He returned with a map of possibility. There were cities beyond the deserts. There were kingdoms beyond the mountains. There were horses in Fergana stronger than the horses China possessed. There were goods moving west without Chinese officials guiding them. There were people who had never seen the Han Emperor, never bowed before his court, never heard the sounds of the Chinese capital, yet whose lives were already being touched by Chinese cloth. Zhang Qian had discovered not a road, exactly, but a connected world. Long before any European scholar gave it a name, long before camel caravans became a romantic image painted on the surface of world history, the lands between China, India, Persia, Arabia, Central Asia, the Mediterranean, and the steppe were being joined by exchange. Not joined easily, not joined completely, not joined as the modern world is joined, by wires and satellites and container ships. Joined slowly, dangerously, unevenly, by horses, camels, boats, letters, coins, rumors, songs, monks, interpreters, slaves, ambassadors, and merchants who often knew only one part of the road and trusted others to carry the journey onward. The name we use for that world is the Silk Road, though even that name is a simplification. There was no single road. There were many routes, shifting with wars, dynasties, deserts, taxes, rivers, bandits, and political opportunity. Silk was important, but it was never the only thing that mattered. And the road was not always overland. The sea lanes of the Indian Ocean, the Persian Gulf, the Red Sea, and the South China Sea formed a southern web of movement just as important as the caravan routes that crossed the deserts. It is better to imagine the Silk Roads as threads, some thin, some thick, some bright, some nearly invisible, crossing the vast fabric of Afro-Eurasia. A bolt of Chinese silk might move west through a dozen hands without any single person traveling from China to Rome. A Buddhist text might leave India in the memory of a monk, become words on a palm leaf manuscript, be translated into a Central Asian language, then into Chinese, then copied in a cave temple near Dunhuang by someone who had never seen the Ganges. A glass cup made in the Roman world might end up in a Chinese tomb. A horse from Fergana might change imperial military policy. A disease carried by fleas and rodents might move through the same corridors that carried spices and prayer. This is why the Silk Roads matter. They were not simply routes of trade. They were routes of transformation. They changed what people wore, what they ate, what they believed, what they could ride on, how they counted, how they imagined the heavens, how they feared strangers, and how they understood the size of the world. Tonight, the road begins not with a line on a map, but with a question. What happens when distant civilizations, each convinced of its own completeness, discover that they are not alone? The answer begins in geography. Between China and the Mediterranean lay some of the most difficult terrain on Earth. There were deserts where the wind could erase tracks in an hour, and where the wrong choice of well could mean death. There were mountains so high that breath became thin and animals stumbled under loads that had seemed manageable in the lowlands. There were salt flats, gravel plains, frozen passes, river valleys, steppe grasslands, and oasis towns that shone in the imagination of travelers because water in a dry world is more precious than gold. The Gobi and the Taklamakan were not empty in the simple sense. They had edges, routes, wells, watchtowers, shrines, graves, and people who knew how to survive near them. But to an outsider, they could seem like hostile worlds. The Taklamakan in particular acquired a reputation so fearful that later travelers spoke of it as a place one entered at the risk of never coming out. The desert did not need to attack. It only had to remain itself, dry, wide, indifferent, bright by day, cold by night, beautiful in the way a danger can be beautiful from a distance. The Silk Roads did not cross these landscapes randomly. They followed the logic of water and shelter. Routes bent toward oases, skirted the edges of deserts, moved along river corridors, climbed passes where animals could survive, and joined places where food and fodder could be found. Geography did not merely influence the Silk Roads. Geography designed them. The Bactrian camel was one of the great inventions of this world, though it was not an invention made of metal or wood. It was a living technology. With 2 humps, thick hair, broad padded feet, and a body adapted to extremes of heat and cold, the Bactrian camel made the overland routes possible at a scale horses could not match. It could carry heavy loads across long dry distances. It could endure cold mountain mornings and desert afternoons. It could kneel under bales of silk, sacks of spices, bundles of paper, metalwork, medicines, pigments, and personal possessions, then rise and walk into distances that would have broken other animals. A caravan was not a romantic procession drifting across sand under a perfect moon. It was a working organism. Camels had to be fed, loaded, unloaded, rested, treated when sick, and kept from straying. Men had to know the order of march, the location of wells, the signs of weather, the politics of the next oasis, the reputation of local guards, and the price of grain. There were arguments over loads, payments, damaged goods, lost animals, and taxes. There was boredom as well as danger. There were days when nothing happened except walking, dust, heat, and the sound of bells tied to animals moving one after another across the open land. And then, after days of emptiness, there would be an oasis. An oasis city was one of the most important human creations of the Silk Roads. It was not only a place where travelers stopped. It was a place where worlds met. Kashgar, Khotan, Turfan, Dunhuang, Merv, Bokhara, Samarkand, and many smaller towns stood at points where geography allowed settlement and trade to concentrate. Some were fed by rivers descending from mountains. Some depended on springs or underground channels. Around them were fields, orchards, vineyards, workshops, stables, temples, markets, and caravanserais. A traveler arriving at an oasis after the desert would smell water before seeing much of the city. Irrigated fields carried a different scent from dry earth. There might be poplar trees, mud walls, smoke from cooking fires, animals calling from enclosures, and the low human noise of a place where many languages overlapped. A merchant could learn the price of silk, the news from China, the reliability of a guide, the danger of a local war, and the rumor of plague in a city several weeks away. A monk could find a monastery. A pilgrim could ask for a text. A horse trader could inspect animals. A scribe could write a letter that might travel farther than its writer ever would. The caravanserai was the physical heart of this world. It might be built around a courtyard, with rooms for people, spaces for animals, storage for goods, and a gate that could be closed at night. Inside, strangers became temporary neighbors. A Sogdian merchant might bargain with a Persian agent. A Chinese official might listen to a Turkic guide. A Buddhist monk might share tea with a Nestorian Christian. A Muslim scholar in a later century might sleep under the same roof as a Hindu trader from India. Not all encounters were peaceful or profound. Some were only practical. But practical contact, repeated for centuries, can change civilizations. The Sogdians understood this better than almost anyone. Sogdiana lay around the fertile valleys of Central Asia, especially around Samarkand and Bokhara. Its people spoke an Eastern Iranian language. They did not build the largest empire of the Silk Roads, but for centuries they became among its most effective connectors. Sogdian merchants established communities from Central Asia to China. They learned languages, maintained trust networks, organized caravans, handled credit, passed letters, translated customs, and moved between courts that might otherwise have known little about each other. The Sogdians were not merely middlemen in the dismissive sense. They were the social technology of long-distance commerce. In a world without modern banks, insurance companies, instant communication, or enforceable international contracts, trust was hard to build and easy to lose. A merchant sending goods across thousands of kilometers needed partners who could be relied upon in places he might never visit. Family ties, religious communities, shared language, reputation, and written correspondence all mattered. The Sogdian diaspora gave the Silk Roads a nervous system. A handful of letters discovered near Dunhuang makes this world suddenly intimate. Written by Sogdian merchants in the early 4th century CE, they speak not in grand historical declarations, but in the voices of people trying to survive commerce, uncertainty, and distance. They mention disrupted trade, lost connections, silver, linen, musk, pepper, and anxiety. One letter includes the voice of a woman abandoned and desperate, far from home, asking why no one has helped her. The Silk Roads were not only camels and kings. They were also letters that did not arrive in time, debts unpaid, families separated, and lives suspended between cities. This human scale matters because the Silk Roads are easy to make too grand. The phrase itself can become a golden haze. But the real network was made of individual choices: to risk the next stage, to trust a partner, to send a son abroad, to copy a sacred text, to load another camel, to pay the toll, to wait through winter, to cross the pass before snow closed it. Silk gave the routes their most famous name because silk was one of the great luxury materials of the ancient world. Its production depended on an astonishing chain of knowledge. Silkworms fed on mulberry leaves, cocoons unwound into fine filaments, threads twisted, dyed, woven, and finished into cloth light enough to seem almost unreal to those who first touched it. For centuries, Chinese sericulture was a guarded art. The fabric moved outward more easily than the knowledge of how to produce it. In Rome, silk became a symbol of wealth, desire, and moral anxiety. Roman writers complained about luxury goods arriving from the East and silver flowing out to pay for them. Some moralists disapproved of silk because it could be woven so thin that it revealed the body beneath. This was not only a complaint about fashion. It was a complaint about empire, appetite, and the fear that foreign luxury could soften Roman discipline. Every society that imports beauty also imports worry about what that beauty is doing to its soul. The Romans often did not know exactly where silk came from. They knew of distant people called Syries associated with silk, but the chain between Chinese producers and Mediterranean consumers was long and opaque. A Roman aristocrat wearing silk might be connected to Chinese villages, Central Asian merchants, Parthian intermediaries, desert animals, and Mediterranean ports without knowing the names of any of them. That is one of the defining features of the Silk Roads. They connected people who did not know they were connected. The flow was not one way. China wanted things from the West and the steppe as urgently as Rome wanted silk. Horses mattered especially. The Han court's fascination with the horses of Fergana was not a luxury obsession. It was a military need. The Xiongnu rode with a mobility China struggled to match. Better horses meant better cavalry, better frontier defense, and greater imperial confidence. The so-called heavenly horses, praised for their strength and speed, became objects of state policy. China sent silk west, but it also sought blood, muscle, and hooves. Glass moved east. Roman and later Sasanian glass vessels impressed elites far from the Mediterranean because they had a clarity and delicacy that local crafts did not always match. Gold and silver moved. Lapis lazuli, jade, musk, furs, carpets, metalwork, ivory, pearls, medicines, dyes, and perfumes moved. So did humble things that rarely dominate museum displays: saddles, rope, grain, dried fruit, wool, leather, tools, and paper. Long-distance luxury depended on short-distance practicality. A caravan could not cross a desert on beauty alone. Spices were another world of desire. Pepper, cinnamon, cloves, nutmeg, cardamom, ginger, and aromatics moved through maritime and land networks that joined South Asia, Southeast Asia, Arabia, East Africa, Persia, and the Mediterranean. The spice trade reminds us that the Silk Roads were never only a northern overland story. The Indian Ocean was a second great arena of exchange, governed by monsoon winds rather than mountain passes. Sailors learned when winds reversed, when to leave, when to wait, and how to cross waters that looked empty but followed seasonal laws as real as any road. Ports were oasis cities of the sea. A port in Gujarat, the Malabar coast, South Arabia, the Persian Gulf, East Africa, or southern China could gather goods from inland and send them outward by ship. Sailors, brokers, translators, money changers, tax collectors, shipwrights, and religious communities all lived in these maritime zones. A bale of cloth could move from an inland loom to a river boat, from river boat to coastal ship, from coastal ship to ocean-going vessel, and from there into another chain of merchants. The Silk Roads were not a line. They were a metabolism. Nomads were essential to that metabolism. Settled civilizations often described nomadic peoples as threats, and sometimes they were. Caravans could be raided. Oasis towns could be attacked. Steppe confederations could demand tribute, disrupt routes, or force empires into expensive frontier wars. But nomads were not outside the Silk Roads. They were part of them. They supplied horses, livestock, furs, military skill, guides, protection, and political frameworks that could make trade safer when relations were stable. The steppe was not empty space between civilizations. It was a world with its own logic. Mobility was wealth. Herds were capital. Knowledge of pasture, water, weather, and distance was power. A mounted confederation could connect regions faster than many settled states could administer them. When steppe empires were fragmented, routes could be dangerous. When a large nomadic empire imposed order, long-distance trade could flourish. The Mongol period made this clear on a scale the world had never seen. The conquests of Genghis Khan and his successors were devastating, and many cities experienced Mongol power as fire, slaughter, and ruin. But once the Mongol Empire and its successor khanates controlled vast stretches of Eurasia, they also created conditions for extraordinary movement. Roads were protected. Relay stations supported communication. Official travelers carried tablets of authority. Merchants, envoys, craftsmen, monks, and adventurers moved across distances that had previously been far more difficult to cross. This period is often called the Pax Mongolica, the Mongol peace, though the phrase must be used carefully. It was peace after conquest, order built on terrifying violence. Yet it did allow connections between China, Central Asia, Persia, the Black Sea, and Europe to become unusually direct. Marco Polo's famous journey belongs to this world. So do the journeys of Franciscan envoys to the Mongol court, merchants from Italian cities, Muslim travelers, Armenian traders, Persian administrators, and countless people whose names were not preserved. Marco Polo became the most famous European traveler to the East, but he was not the first person to connect those worlds, and he was not the center of the Silk Roads. His importance lies partly in what his account did to European imagination. It described cities, court ceremonies, paper money, coal, postal routes, and wealth on a scale many European readers struggled to believe. Whether every detail he reported is accepted or debated, the world he described widened Europe's mental map. The East ceased to be only rumor. It became a place of cities, administration, luxury, and power. Long before Marco Polo, religions had already traveled these routes. Buddhism moved from India into Central Asia and China along the Silk Roads over the first centuries of the Common Era. It did not arrive as a simple package. It had to be translated, visually adapted, philosophically interpreted, patronized, resisted, and remade. Indian monks, Central Asian translators, Chinese patrons, Sogdian donors, and oasis communities all played roles. A concept born in the languages and landscapes of India entered China, a civilization with Confucian ethics, Taoist cosmology, ancestor rites, and its own ancient political traditions. For Buddhism to take root there, it had to find Chinese words for Indian ideas. Translation was a spiritual and intellectual adventure. How does one translate nirvana into a language shaped by different metaphysical assumptions? How does one explain karma, rebirth, monastic discipline, emptiness, compassion, and liberation to readers whose inherited categories were not the same? Early translators sometimes borrowed Taoist vocabulary. Later translators refined terminology. Monks argued over meanings. Schools formed. Chinese Buddhism became not a foreign import preserved unchanged, but a new growth from roots carried across mountains and deserts. The cave temples of Dunhuang preserve this process in color and stone. At the edge of the desert, where routes converged before entering China proper, generations of patrons funded caves painted with Buddhas, bodhisattvas, heavenly musicians, donors, guardian kings, paradise scenes, narrative tales, and patterns drawn from many artistic traditions. The Mogao Caves are not only religious monuments. They are an archive of movement. In their walls one can see Indian iconography, Central Asian faces, Chinese brushwork, textile patterns, court costume, devotional imagination, and the wealth of merchants who wanted merit and memory. The library cave at Dunhuang deepens that wonder. Sealed for centuries and rediscovered in 1900, it contained tens of thousands of manuscripts and printed works in multiple languages. Buddhist sutras, contracts, calendars, letters, paintings, ritual texts, and secular documents were preserved by dryness, chance, and the silence of a sealed room. Among the most famous works found there is the Diamond Sutra, dated to 868 CE, often described as the world's earliest complete dated printed book. Its existence reminds us that the Silk Roads carried not only books, but the technologies and devotional habits that made books multiply. A manuscript is a traveler that can outlive every caravan. It crosses not only space, but time. A monk copies a text by lamplight. A donor pays for its reproduction in the hope of merit. A cave is sealed. Centuries pass. Empires fall. Languages change. Then the paper is opened again and the road resumes, not under camel bells, but under the eyes of scholars. Christianity also moved east. The Church of the East, often called Nestorian in older accounts, carried Syriac Christian traditions across Persia, Central Asia, India, China, and the steppe. In 781 CE, a stone stele in China recorded the arrival and spread of the luminous religion from the West. Its Chinese and Syriac inscriptions show a Christian community trying to express its faith in Chinese language and concepts after a long journey across cultural frontiers. This was not the Christianity of Rome or Constantinople moving westward into Europe. It was an Eastern Christian road, largely forgotten in many later histories, but real in the stones and texts of the Silk Road world. Zoroastrianism traveled with Iranian communities. Manichaeism, a universal religion born in the Sasanian world, moved with merchants and missionaries and found patrons among the Uyghurs. Islam, after the 7th century, transformed Central Asia gradually and profoundly. Arab conquest, Persianate culture, Turkic conversion, trade, scholarship, Sufi networks, and urban patronage all played roles. Samarkand, Bokhara, Merv, and other cities became centers of Islamic learning, architecture, law, poetry, science, and devotion. Older traditions did not vanish overnight, and local cultures did not become identical. Central Asian Islam absorbed, translated, and reworked much of the world that came before it. The movement of religion along the Silk Roads was not always peaceful. Temples were sometimes destroyed. Patronage shifted. Rulers changed favored traditions. Communities disappeared. Yet the deeper pattern is one of astonishing religious plurality. In some Silk Road cities, a traveler might encounter Buddhist monasteries, Zoroastrian fire temples, Manichaean texts, Christian communities, Islamic mosques, Hindu merchants, Jewish traders, and local cults within overlapping commercial worlds. The marketplace did not erase difference. It made difference unavoidable. Technology moved with the same complexity. Papermaking began in China and moved west over centuries. The old story often ties its transmission to the Battle of Talas in 751, when Chinese prisoners supposedly brought papermaking knowledge to the Islamic world. That story may preserve a memory of technological transfer, but the process was almost certainly more gradual and more complicated. Paper was already moving through Central Asia before and around that period, and the adoption of papermaking in Samarkand, Baghdad, and beyond depended on craftsmen, materials, patronage, and local adaptation. Still, the result was revolutionary. Paper was cheaper and more flexible than many earlier writing materials. When it spread through the Islamic world, it helped support administration, scholarship, literature, mathematics, and eventually the book cultures that would reach Europe. Silk production itself traveled. For centuries, China guarded the knowledge of sericulture. Later traditions tell of silkworm eggs smuggled out of China, sometimes hidden in the hollow staffs of monks, and carried to Byzantium under the Emperor Justinian. The exact details are wrapped in legend and court storytelling, but the broader fact is clear: the monopoly eventually broke. Once the technique moved, silk was no longer only a Chinese product. It became Byzantine, Persian, Islamic, Italian, and global, each region adding its own patterns, colors, and meanings. Gunpowder, the compass, printing, porcelain techniques, metallurgical knowledge, crops, musical instruments, medical ideas, and artistic motifs all moved through overlapping routes. Not all traveled in one direction. Not all moved quickly. Sometimes an object moved first and the technique came later. Sometimes a technique arrived but changed because local materials differed. Sometimes an idea was misunderstood and became productive in its new form. Transmission was rarely copying. It was translation. Mathematics traveled in this way. The positional decimal system and the concept of zero developed in India, moved into the Islamic scholarly world, and later entered Europe through Arabic mathematical texts, translations, merchants, and scholars. These numerals are often called Arabic numerals in Europe because Europe received them through Arabic-speaking intermediaries, though their deeper origin was Indian. The Silk Roads, broadly understood, were not just paths for luxury goods. They were channels through which the basic tools of thought moved. A better way to write numbers can change accounting, astronomy, architecture, taxation, navigation, and science. Astronomy also crossed boundaries. Babylonian, Indian, Greek, Persian, Chinese, and Islamic traditions all observed the sky with different assumptions and methods. Along the Silk Roads, astronomical tables, instruments, calendars, and interpretations traveled. Some of this was science. Some was astrology. In the pre-modern world, the two were often intertwined. Rulers wanted calendars for ritual and agriculture. They wanted omens. Merchants wanted seasons. Sailors wanted stars. Monks and scholars wanted cosmic order. The sky was universal, but every civilization read it through its own grammar. Contact taught them new ways to read. Art moved more visibly. A lotus pattern, a halo around a holy figure, a vine scroll, a pearl roundel, a winged horse, a musician's pose, a textile motif, a pigment, or a shade of blue could travel from one medium to another and one civilization to another. Silk textiles often carried designs farther than armies did. A pattern woven in Sasanian Iran might influence Chinese decoration. Chinese cloud forms might appear in Islamic art. Buddhist images from Gandhara, shaped partly by Hellenistic artistic traditions after Alexander's conquests, helped give form to the Buddha in regions far from India. The Silk Roads made beauty migratory. This beauty was not weightless. It was carried by labor. Silkworms were tended. Mulberry leaves were gathered. Threads were reeled. Dyes were prepared. Looms were worked. Camels were loaded. Ships were built. Porters lifted bales. Scribes recorded taxes. Guards patrolled roads. Women in households and workshops spun, sewed, cooked, and managed the invisible work that allowed visible trade to continue. Luxury often hides labor, but the Silk Roads were built on labor at every stage. Chang'an, modern Xi'an, was one of the great eastern anchors of this world. Under the Tang dynasty, it became one of the largest and most cosmopolitan cities on Earth. Its streets were organized with imperial planning. Its markets gathered goods from across Asia. Foreign communities lived there: Sogdians, Persians, Turks, Indians, Koreans, Japanese, Arabs, and others. Religions from far away found space, at least in periods of tolerance. Music, dance, clothing, food, and language all carried foreign traces. The capital of China was not isolated behind a wall of civilization. It was an imperial center alive with the movement of the world. A day in Tang Chang'an might include the smell of foreign spices, the sound of Central Asian music, Buddhist monks reciting texts, envoys waiting at court, horse traders discussing prices, officials recording tribute, and aristocrats admiring imported glass or metalwork. The city was Chinese in its political heart, but cosmopolitan in its bloodstream. The Silk Roads did not make China less itself. They made China more aware of the world and gave the world more ways to enter China. At the western and central side of the network, Samarkand became a city almost made for legend. Alexander knew it as Marikanda. Sogdian merchants made it a commercial center. Islamic culture made it a city of learning. The Mongols destroyed it. Timur later rebuilt it with imperial ambition and breathtaking beauty. Blue tiles, madrasas, domes, inscriptions, courtyards, and astronomical patronage turned Samarkand into one of the great symbolic cities of Eurasia. Its splendor was not separate from its position. Samarkand was beautiful because it stood where routes, crafts, rulers, and traditions met. Bokhara had a different depth, a city of scholars, merchants, mosques, madrasas, and memory. Merv, in present-day Turkmenistan, was one of the great oasis cities of the Islamic world before catastrophe struck it in the Mongol conquest. Kashgar stood at a hinge between the Darim Basin, the Pamirs, and the routes towards Central Asia. Khotan was famous for jade and Buddhism. Turfan, with its irrigation systems and manuscript finds, preserved traces of many languages and faiths. Dunhuang guarded the threshold between China and the desert routes. Each city was a knot in the road, and every knot had its own story. The Silk Roads were not only elite. Ordinary lives moved through them too. A cook in an oasis town learned to use an imported spice. A child heard songs in 2 languages. A craftsman copied a foreign pattern without knowing its origin. A local ruler adopted a title from a prestigious neighbor. A pilgrim carried a charm. A merchant married into a family far from his birthplace. A soldier stationed at a frontier post wrote home and waited for an answer that might never come. These small transmissions mattered because culture often changes not through official decrees, but through repeated contact at the level of daily life. But connection also carried danger. The same roads that moved silk moved disease. This is one of the darkest truths of the Silk Roads. Connectivity is never morally simple. It can enrich and kill at the same time. The more people, animals, fleas, rats, goods, grain, textiles, and ships move across distance, the more opportunities pathogens have to move with them. A caravanserai can spread news, trust, and infection. A port can receive spices and plague in the same season. The Antonine Plague that struck the Roman Empire in the 2nd century CE, it may have been connected to Eastern campaigns and trade networks, though the exact disease and route remain debated. The plague of Justinian in the 6th century moved through the connected Mediterranean and Near Eastern world with devastating effects. The Black Death of the 14th century, caused by Yersinia pestis, spread across a world made highly connected by Mongol-era exchange, maritime routes, steppe ecology, war, trade, and human movement. The precise origin and pathways remain complex and debated, but the broader lesson is clear. The infrastructure of connection can become the infrastructure of pandemic. This does not make the Silk Roads evil. It makes them human. Every network that joins people also joins their vulnerabilities. The beauty of Dunhuang and the horror of plague belong to the same historical reality. The roads that carried sutras, glass, paper, and songs could also carry fleas hidden in the fur of animals or in the cargo spaces of ships. A connected world receives gifts and dangers together. The Silk Roads also carried violence in more direct forms. Trade attracted taxation, and taxation attracted states. Wealth attracted raiders. Empires fought for control of corridors, cities, and passes. A caravan might pay for protection from the same power that could threaten it if relations changed. Merchants had to understand not only prices but politics. A profitable route one year could be closed the next by rebellion, border war, plague, banditry, or a ruler's death. Long-distance trade rewarded courage, but it also rewarded caution. Most merchants did not travel from one end of Eurasia to the other. The idea of a single merchant carrying silk from China to Rome is mostly a simplification. More often, goods moved in stages. A merchant bought in one town and sold in another. Another merchant carried the goods onward. Each hand added knowledge, cost, risk, and profit. By the time an object reached its final destination, it might have passed through languages, currencies, legal systems, religions, and climates its maker never imagined. This chain of exchange had a strange consequence. Goods could travel farther than accurate information. Roman writers knew of silk, but not sericulture. Chinese writers heard of distant empires whose descriptions were partly true and partly rumor. Medieval Europeans read of Cathay and the Great Khan with fascination and suspicion. The Silk Roads expanded knowledge, but they also expanded fantasy. Every long road is lined with stories, and the farther a story travels, the more likely it is to change shape. The name Silk Road itself belongs to this history of naming and imagining. In the 19th century, European scholarship helped popularize the term, especially through the work of the German geographer Ferdinand von Richthofen, though the phrase and related ideas have a more complicated history than a simple invention by one man. Ancient travelers did not say they were traveling the Silk Road. A Sogdian merchant at Dunhuang, a monk at Khotan, or a sailor in the Indian Ocean would have known particular roads, towns, patrons, and dangers, not a single grand label. The name is useful, but the name can deceive. To say Silk Roads in the plural is not academic fussiness. It is closer to reality. There were northern routes and southern routes around the Taklamakan. There were paths through the Pamirs. There were roads through Sogdiana and Bactria. There were routes across the steppe. There were maritime routes through the Indian Ocean and South China Sea. There were river routes, pilgrim routes, diplomatic routes, smuggling routes, military routes, and routes known only to local guides. The road was a network because life is a network. The sea routes deserve special weight because for many goods they were easier, cheaper, and more important than the land routes. A ship could carry far more than a caravan. The monsoon winds created a seasonal rhythm of departure and return. Ports such as Guangzhou, Calicut, Siraf, Aden, and later many others tied the maritime world together. Arab, Persian, Indian, Malay, Chinese, and East African merchants all participated. A cargo might include ceramics, spices, timber, incense, ivory, pearls, textiles, and metal. A shipwreck could preserve a whole commercial world on the seafloor. The Belitung shipwreck, a 9th century Arab or Indian Ocean vessel carrying Tang Dynasty ceramics, reminds us how far Chinese goods traveled by sea. Thousands of bowls, jars, and other objects were packed for export toward the Islamic world. This was not a side note to the Silk Roads. It was one of their main forms. The desert caravan and the ocean ship were different answers to the same problem: how to move value across distance. The decline of the overland Silk Roads was gradual. No one woke up one morning and found them gone. Routes shifted, cities rose and fell, and caravans continued for centuries. But the conditions that had made the overland routes especially important changed. The fragmentation of Mongol power made long-distance movement less secure. The Black Death damaged populations and economies. The rise of new political powers changed taxation and access. Maritime routes became more attractive. Portuguese voyages around Africa opened direct European sea access to the Indian Ocean, changing the balance of global trade. The Spanish crossing of the Pacific later connected the Americas to Asian commerce. The world became more global, and in becoming more global, it transformed the older corridors. Yet the Silk Roads did not simply end. They changed form. Central Asian cities continued to live, trade, pray, and remember. Pilgrims still traveled. Merchants still moved goods. Empires still sought roads, railways, pipelines, and ports across the same old geographies. Modern political projects sometimes invoke the Silk Roads because the phrase still carries prestige, connection, antiquity, commerce, civilization, and peaceful exchange. But the ancient roads were never only peaceful, and modern invocations should not make them simpler than they were. The deepest legacy of the Silk Roads is not any single object. It is the discovery that civilizations are not sealed containers. China was shaped by India, Central Asia, Persia, the steppe, and the sea. Europe was shaped by Asia and the Islamic world. Islam was shaped by Persian, Greek, Indian, and Central Asian inheritances. Buddhism changed as it crossed languages. Art changed as patterns migrated. Mathematics changed as numerals moved. Food changed as crops and spices traveled. Even the idea of world history changes when the Silk Roads are taken seriously, because no civilization appears completely alone. This does not mean that everything came from everywhere in the same way. Local invention mattered. Independent traditions mattered. China was not merely a receiver. India was not merely a source. Persia was not merely an intermediary. Central Asia was not merely a corridor. Europe was not merely an endpoint. Each region created, selected, transformed, and sometimes resisted what came to it. Exchange is not passive. To receive is also to remake. The Silk Roads made this remaking visible across a vast scale. A Buddhist image in a Chinese cave could contain echoes of India, Iran, and Hellenistic art. A piece of silk in a European treasury could carry Chinese technique, Central Asian mediation, and Christian reuse. A mathematical symbol could travel through Sanskrit, Arabic, Latin, and vernacular calculation. A musical instrument could change shape as it crossed borders. A food could become local after several generations, its foreign origin forgotten. Perhaps that is the quiet power of the Silk Roads. Their greatest effects are often invisible because they have become ordinary. The numbers on a page, the paper beneath ink, the spices in a kitchen, the silk in a garment, the shape of a religious statue, the idea of a pilgrimage, the expectation that goods from far away can appear in a local market. All of these can feel natural, but they are the result of centuries of movement. A person standing in Dunhuang at sunset might have understood this more directly than we do. To the east lay China. To the west lay the desert routes. To the south lay paths toward Tibet and India. To the north lay steppe worlds and shifting powers. The air would have carried dust, smoke, animal smells, cooking, and incense. The caves glowed with painted heavens. The watchtowers guarded roads that were never entirely safe. Letters left from there could travel towards Samarkand or disappear in an abandoned tower. Monks could pray for all beings while merchants argued over the price of musk. A person in Samarkand might have felt the same at another crossing of worlds. Goods from China, India, Iran, the steppe, and the Islamic heartlands could meet there. Stories of distant rulers circulated. Scholars read and argued. Craftsmen turned imported materials into local beauty. A city like Samarkand was not only on the road. It was made by the road. The road also made loneliness. A trader who left home might not return for years. A monk might die before reaching the monastery he sought. A ship might vanish in the monsoon. A caravan might find a well dry. A letter might be written to someone already dead. Connection does not abolish distance. It gives people reasons to cross it anyway. This is what makes the Silk Road so compelling. They were built from longing as much as profit. Longing for horses strong enough to defend a frontier, for silk soft enough to announce status, for scriptures holy enough to justify a journey, for spices fragrant enough to make distance tasteable, for knowledge powerful enough to change calculation, for alliance, salvation, wealth, status, safety, and wonder. There is a story told in many forms about travelers in the desert hearing voices that sound like companions calling from the dark, or seeing lights that lead them away from the route. Whether taken as folklore or warning, such stories reveal the emotional truth of desert travel. The road was not simply a commercial structure. It was a psychological ordeal. To cross empty land with goods worth stealing and water worth more than money required discipline and trust. Every oasis was a relief because every oasis meant the world had not ended after all. The mountains offered another kind of trial. High passes could kill through cold, snow, thin air, falling rock, and exhaustion. Animals stumbled. Loads had to be redistributed. A storm could trap a caravan. Yet the mountains also linked worlds that seemed otherwise separate. The Pamirs, the Hindu Kush, the Karakoram, and the Tian Shan were barriers and bridges at the same time. From high places, travelers could see distances that made human ambition seem fragile, then descend toward a valley where markets and monasteries waited. The Silk Roads were full of such contradictions. They were dangerous and productive, violent and creative, worldly and sacred, local and global, fragile, and persistent. Empires tried to control them, but no empire owned them completely. Merchants profited from them, but profit alone does not explain the movement of monks and pilgrims. Religions traveled through them, but so did luxuries condemned by moralists. They made the world larger by showing people what lay beyond their borders, and smaller by making those borders crossable. Zhang Qian could not have known all this when he returned to the Han court. He could not have imagined the later Buddhist caves of Dunhuang, the Sogdian merchant colonies, the spread of Islam through Central Asia, the Mongol relay stations, the journeys of Marco Polo, the European hunger for spices, the Portuguese ships rounding Africa, or modern scholars using the name Silk Road to describe a connected world. He knew only that the West was real, that China needed what was there, and that information could be as valuable as tribute. That is where the story began in imperial memory, a failed mission that opened a door. The alliance Zhang Qian sought did not become the alliance his emperor wanted, but the knowledge he brought back altered policy. It made the Western regions strategically and commercially meaningful. It drew Chinese attention towards Central Asia in a new way. It helped make diplomacy, warfare, trade, and imagination face west. The world he revealed was already moving. He did not create the roads by seeing them. But sometimes discovery is not the creation of something new. It is the moment when power finally notices what ordinary movement has been building for generations. The Silk Roads were never a golden age of effortless harmony. They were more interesting than that. They were a system in which cooperation and exploitation, curiosity and fear, faith and profit, empire and individual courage all traveled together. They show us that connection is not innocence. It is responsibility. Once worlds touch, they change each other, and no one can fully control what travels next. A bolt of silk can become fashion in Rome. A Buddhist sutra can become a Chinese scripture. A Sogdian letter can sleep in a desert tower for 16 centuries. A plague bacterium can ride routes built for wealth. A number can cross languages and alter mathematics. A camel bell can mark the pace of a caravan that no emperor sees, but every empire, in time, depends upon. And so the Silk Roads remain one of the great stories of human history, not because they were one road, and not because they were made only of silk, but because they reveal the ancient world as connected, restless, porous, and alive. The caravan leaves before dawn. The animals rise complaining from their knees. Loads are tightened. A guide looks toward the line of low hills where the track begins to disappear into gravel and wind. Behind the caravan are the walls of the oasis, the last trees, the last easy water, the last voices of the market. Ahead are distances measured not in miles, but in wells, passes, seasons, and trust. Somewhere far away, in a city the caravan will never reach, someone is waiting for what it carries. The silk will move on. The letter will move on. The prayer will move on. The rumor will move on. The road will change hands, change names, change rulers, and still remain. To understand why Zhang Qian's mission mattered, it helps to see the Han frontier not as a line on a map, but as a zone of pressure. North of China, the steppe world did not obey the rhythms of Chinese agriculture. It moved with herds and seasons. Mounted warriors could appear with frightening speed, raid settlements, withdraw beyond easy pursuit, and return again when conditions favored them. Chinese walls, garrisons, diplomacy, marriage alliances, gifts, and punitive expeditions were all attempts to manage a problem that was military, political, and ecological at once. The Xiongnu were not merely raiders. They were a political force able to organize steppe peoples under powerful leadership. Their strength came from mobility, horsemanship, and the ability to live in landscapes that Chinese infantry and supply systems found difficult. To fight such enemies, the Han state needed better horses, better intelligence, and a more precise understanding of the lands beyond its western horizon. Zhang Qian's journey therefore belongs to a world in which information could change strategy. He did not bring back a conquered province. He brought back the knowledge that the frontier was part of a larger system. The horses of Fergana became legendary because they represented more than animals. They represented access to a different military ecology. Chinese sources speak of horses that sweated blood, a phrase that may reflect awe, myth-making, or a real medical condition caused by parasites beneath the skin. Whatever the phrase originally meant, the desire was real. Emperor Wu was willing to send expeditions far west because horses could alter the balance between settled empire and steppe power. Silk moved west partly because China wanted hooves moving east. This reverses the simple luxury story. The Silk Roads were not born only from the desire of rich people to wear beautiful fabric. They were born from military anxiety, state ambition, diplomatic curiosity, and the material needs of empires. Silk was payment. Horses were strategy. Envoys were intelligence gatherers. Markets were connected to frontiers. Beauty and war often traveled together. The Han court also learned that goods could move without imperial permission. Zhang Qian found Chinese products in places where no official Chinese caravan had taken them. That discovery must have been unsettling. It meant that borderland peoples, steppe intermediaries, oasis traders, and unknown merchants were already carrying China outward. The state could try to formalize, tax, protect, or exploit these movements, but it had not invented them. Often, history works this way. Ordinary exchange creates a reality that governments later name. At the Chinese end of the road, the western regions became a zone of garrisons, diplomacy, and competition. Control of the Darim Basin mattered because its oasis towns controlled the passages around the desert. Whoever held or influenced those towns could shape the movement of goods, armies, monks, and information. Chinese dynasties, steppe powers, Tibetan forces, local kings, and later Islamic rulers all contested these corridors. The Silk Roads were never simply free trade under a peaceful sky. They were corridors of opportunity guarded by force. Dunhuang stood at the edge of that world like a door with many locks. To the east lay the Chinese heartland. To the west lay the desert routes around the Taklamakan. To the north and south were alternative paths shaped by terrain and politics. It was a military post, a religious center, a commercial station, and a psychological threshold. For someone leaving China, Dunhuang could feel like the last familiar place. For someone arriving from Central Asia, it could be the first sign that the world of Chinese administration and culture had begun. The Mogao caves near Dunhuang are often described for their beauty, but their location is just as important as their art. They were carved into cliffs near a route used by travelers who faced danger and uncertainty. People in motion need sacred protection. A merchant who had survived the desert might give thanks. A family might sponsor an image for merit. A local official might fund a cave to display piety and status. A monk might find there an image of paradise in a landscape of dust. The caves transformed fear, gratitude, wealth, and devotion into color. In those paintings, the Silk Roads become visible as layered worlds. The Buddha may sit in stillness at the center of a cosmic scene, but around him are textiles, donors, musicians, buildings, banners, armor, faces, gestures, and decorative forms drawn from a wide geography. The sacred image does not float above history. It carries history in every pigment and line. To look at Dunhuang is to see faith traveling with style. The sealed library cave is even more intimate because manuscripts preserve thought in the moment of use. Some texts were sacred, some were administrative, some were practical, some were worn, some were copied with devotion, others perhaps as exercises or records. There were Chinese, Tibetan, Sanskrit, Sogdian, Khotanese, Uyghur, Syriac, and other linguistic traces. A cave full of paper can be more revealing than a palace, because a palace tells us what power wanted to display, while documents tell us what daily life needed to remember. Among the Dunhuang materials, the Diamond Sutra has become famous partly because of its date. Printed in 868 CE, it shows that woodblock printing was already being used for religious reproduction centuries before printing transformed Europe. Its colophon states that it was made for free universal distribution, a phrase that feels unexpectedly modern, though it belonged to a Buddhist world of merit and devotion rather than to modern publishing. The object is beautiful, but its deeper significance lies in the meeting of technology and piety. Printing spread because people wanted texts to multiply. The Buddhist pilgrim Xuanzang belongs to the same world of movement. In the 7th century, he left China for India in search of authoritative texts and teachings. His journey took him through Central Asia, across deserts and mountains, into the great Buddhist centers of the Indian subcontinent, and eventually back to China with manuscripts and memories. He spent years translating. His life later inspired one of China's great literary works, but the historical Xuanzang was not merely a figure of adventure. He was a scholar whose body crossed geography so that ideas could cross language. Translation was never mechanical. A word can be carried across a border more easily than a meaning. Buddhist translators had to decide whether to preserve foreign sounds, invent new Chinese compounds, borrow existing philosophical terms, or reshape doctrine through familiar language. Each decision had consequences. A translation can open a door, but it can also bend what passes through it. Chinese Buddhism became Chinese not by rejecting its Indian origins, but by translating them deeply enough that they could live in another civilization. Central Asian cities played a crucial role in this translation. Kutcha, Khotan, Turfan, and other oasis kingdoms were not passive corridors between India and China. They had their own schools, languages, rulers, art, and religious traditions. The great translator Kumarjiva, born in Kutcha, became one of the most influential figures in Chinese Buddhist translation after being brought to Chang'an. His translations were admired for clarity and elegance, helping shape how generations of Chinese readers encountered Buddhist thought. The Silk Roads worked through such human bridges. Khotan gives another example. It was famous for jade, silk, Buddhism, and a culture deeply connected to both India and China. Its legends told of silk production arriving through a princess who smuggled silkworm eggs in her headdress when she married into Khotan, a story that may not be literal but expresses a historical truth. Technical knowledge often moved through marriage, migration, secrecy, and desire. A princess in a legend can carry what armies cannot easily seize. The legends of smuggled silkworms repeat in different forms because silk was not only valuable cloth. It was controlled knowledge. A society that knows how to make something others cannot make possesses power. When that knowledge escapes, wealth shifts. The Silk Roads were therefore also roads of industrial espionage, imitation, adaptation, and technological leakage. Secrets rarely remain sealed forever when the reward for opening them is high enough. Paper followed a similar pattern, though with less romance in the storytelling. Before paper became common in the Islamic world, writing materials could be expensive, heavy, or regionally limited. Paper changed the economics of writing. Administration could expand. Scholars could copy more. Books could circulate more widely. Accounts could be kept more efficiently. The movement of paper-making westward helped support the intellectual brilliance of Abbasid Baghdad, the libraries of the Islamic world, and eventually the manuscript cultures of Europe. A sheet of paper seems quiet, but it can alter the speed of thought. The Abbasid world was one of the great beneficiaries and engines of Silk Road exchange. Baghdad stood not on the old overland caravan route in a simple sense. but at the center of an imperial and intellectual world that drew from Persia, India, Greece, Central Asia, and beyond. Scholars translated Greek philosophy, Indian mathematics, Persian statecraft, and medical knowledge into Arabic. Merchants linked the caliphate to China, India, East Africa, and the Mediterranean. The House of Wisdom, whether understood as an institution or a wider culture of translation and scholarship, represents the kind of synthesis that connected worlds made possible. The Islamic world did not merely transmit knowledge from east to west like a neutral pipe. It transformed it. Mathematicians developed algebra. Astronomers refined observations. Physicians organized medical learning. Geographers described routes, peoples, climates, and cities. Merchants recorded practical knowledge of ports and prices. When Europe later received much of this learning through Arabic and Persianate channels, it received knowledge that had already been worked upon by centuries of scholarship. This is why the phrase East meets West is too small. The Silk Roads were not a meeting between two ends. They were a series of centers. China was a center. India was a center. Persia was a center. Central Asia was a center. The Islamic world was a center. Byzantium was a center. The steppe was a center in its own way. The Mediterranean was a center. The roads did not merely connect a beginning and an endpoint. They connected many worlds that each believed themselves meaningful. The Sasanian Empire, before the rise of Islam, was one of those worlds. It controlled key territories between Rome and Central Asia and played a major role in the movement of luxury goods, art, and diplomacy. Sasanian silverware, textiles, and court imagery traveled widely. Persian motifs entered Chinese art. Diplomatic gifts moved between courts. Even when Rome and Persia fought bitter wars, goods and artistic forms could cross the boundaries that armies contested. Enemies can still influence each other. Byzantium also stood in this web. Its elites desired silk, its emperors wanted control of silk production, and its diplomacy with steppe peoples, Persians, and later Islamic powers was shaped by the economics of long-distance exchange. Byzantine silks became prestigious objects in their own right, used in churches, burials, diplomacy, and royal display. A Chinese technique could become a Byzantine symbol, then enter Western European sacred treasuries. Objects have afterlives. The steppe empires had their own afterlives in material culture. The Turk Khaganate, Uyghur Empire, and later Mongol states all shaped the routes by controlling mobility across vast spaces. Turkic languages and peoples spread widely through Inner Asia. Uyghur scribes later served Mongol administration. Mongol rule used and adapted existing systems of record-keeping, relay stations, and taxation. The roads were inherited, not newly invented, by each power that rose along them. A relay station may not sound romantic, but it is one of the most important institutions in world history. Horses, messengers, food, lodging, and authority documents allowed information to move faster than ordinary trade. Empires depend on knowing what is happening before it is too late to respond. The Mongol Yam system made communication across enormous distances more reliable. A message could travel where a private traveler might fail. The road of power ran alongside the road of commerce. Under Mongol rule, merchants sometimes received privileges, protection, and access unimaginable in more fragmented times. But this came with dependency. Protection could become extraction. Tolls could become burdens. Political favor could shift. Merchants have always lived between opportunity and vulnerability. Their wealth depends on routes staying open, but routes are controlled by rulers, guards, weather, and war. The emotional life of merchants is often hidden behind the goods they moved. A bale of silk tells us little about the man who worried over it. Did he borrow money to purchase it? Did he leave his family for years? Did he fear a partner would cheat him? Did he pray at each dangerous pass? Did he learn enough of another language to joke in it, bargain in it, curse in it? Did he die in a city where no one could pronounce his childhood name? The Silk Roads were built by such lives. Women were present too, though the sources often make them less visible. Women produced textiles, managed households, financed religious donations, traveled through marriage alliances, appeared in letters, bought and sold property in some contexts, and shaped the transmission of language and custom in families that crossed cultural boundaries. Elite women could move diplomacy through marriage. Ordinary women could sustain the domestic economies that made mail travel possible. The road was not only mail, even when male riders dominate the record. Enslaved people also moved along these routes. The Silk Roads carried luxury and devotion, but they also carried human beings as property: captives, servants, concubines, soldiers, and laborers. A connected market can sell anything that power allows to be sold. Turkic slaves served in Islamic military systems. Captives from wars were moved across frontiers. Domestic servants lived in cities far from their origins. To tell the Silk Roads only as exchange and enlightenment would be dishonest. Connection can commodify human life as easily as it can transmit wisdom. There were also diplomats whose journeys were not chosen freely in the ordinary sense, but commanded by rulers. Envoys carried gifts, threats, marriage proposals, demands for submission, religious messages, and strategic intelligence. Their bodies became instruments of state communication. A successful embassy required ceremony as much as information. Who stood, who bowed, who sat near the ruler, what gifts were exchanged, what language was used, and how letters were addressed could all carry political meaning. The roads were theaters of protocol. Tribute and trade often overlapped. A foreign ruler might send gifts to a Chinese emperor and receive gifts of greater value in return. Was this submission, diplomacy, commerce, or ceremonial exchange? The answer depends on perspective. Chinese courts often interpreted tribute missions through a hierarchy of civilization and rulership. Foreign participants might see them as profitable diplomatic trade. Both could be true at once. The Silk Roads frequently worked because different parties could interpret the same exchange differently. Misunderstanding did not always prevent connection. In fact, partial misunderstanding may have made some exchanges easier. Each side could fit the other into its own worldview. A merchant only needed enough shared meaning to complete a transaction. A ruler only needed enough ceremony to preserve honor. A translator only needed enough approximation to keep speech moving. Perfect understanding is rare in history. Functional understanding is powerful enough. The movement of food shows this in a humble way. Crops and tastes traveled slowly, often without grand narratives attached. Grapes, pomegranates, walnuts, sesame, alfalfa, carrots, citrus, sugar, tea, and other plants moved through various routes over long periods, carried by farmers, monks, conquerors, merchants, and migrants. A new crop could change agriculture. A new flavor could change cuisine. Alfalfa, introduced to China from the West, mattered because it fed horses. Again, food and war touched each other. Music traveled as well. The Tang court loved foreign music and dance. Central Asian performers influenced Chinese entertainment. Instruments such as lutes, harps, drums, and flutes moved across cultural frontiers, changing shape and status. A melody is harder to trace than a coin, but cultural memory often carries sound long after the route is forgotten. A court performance in Chang'an could contain echoes of Sogdian celebration, Persian rhythm, Indian devotion, and steppe energy. Clothing changed with contact. Boots, belts, robes, patterns, hats, and riding garments moved between nomadic and settled worlds. Chinese elites sometimes adopted foreign styles, then later criticized them as signs of excessive fascination with outsiders. Fashion is never just decoration. It reveals admiration, anxiety, imitation, and resistance. To wear a foreign garment can be a pleasure, a status claim, a political statement, or a scandal. Coins help archaeologists trace these movements. A coin minted in one empire and found far away does not always mean direct trade between two states, but it does reveal circulation, imitation, or prestige. Roman coins in India, Sasanian coins in China, Chinese coins in Central Asia, and imitative coinages all show how money could move beyond the political authority that issued it. Sometimes coins were currency, sometimes bullion, sometimes ornaments, sometimes symbols of distant power. Archaeology has changed the Silk Roads from a story of famous travelers into a story of objects and fragments. A scrap of textile, a wooden document, a painted coffin, a preserved shoe, a merchant letter, a Buddhist banner, a ceramic bowl, a skeleton with isotopic traces, a coin hoard, a shipwreck cargo, a mural, a legal contract. Each adds a small piece. The Silk Road survive less as one continuous archive than as scattered evidence across deserts, museums, storerooms, and excavation reports. The road is reconstructed from fragments because that is how the past usually returns. Some fragments are heartbreaking. The Sogdian letter from a woman named Mune, abandoned in China, gives the Silk Roads a voice of loneliness sharper than any imperial chronicle. She writes of poverty, neglect, and desperation. Her husband is absent. Support has failed. Distance has become suffering. In a history often filled with silk and diplomacy, her words remind us that mobility could destroy as well as enrich. The road that brings opportunity to one person can leave another stranded. Other fragments are playful or ordinary. Documents from Central Asia record purchases, loans, disputes, marriages, religious donations, tax obligations, and school exercises. Children learning to write, monks correcting texts, merchants listing goods, officials counting grain. These are the quiet activities that sustained the great movements. Civilization is held together by records no one expects to become famous. The Silk Roads also shaped language. Words moved with goods, names of products, titles, religious terms, technical vocabulary, and place names crossed linguistic boundaries. Sometimes the borrowed word kept the memory of origin. Sometimes it changed until the origin disappeared. Language is one of the deepest archives of contact. A word in a market can carry a map inside it. Even fear traveled linguistically. Foreign peoples acquired reputations that spread faster than accurate knowledge. The steppe nomad, the desert bandit, the wealthy Eastern king, the cunning merchant, the holy monk, the decadent city, the dangerous pass. These types appear again and again in literature because travelers need ways to make the unfamiliar narratable. Stereotypes can be harmful, but they also reveal how societies managed anxiety about distance. The road invited wonder because it made the impossible plausible. A person could see an object from a place beyond imagination and know that somewhere, beyond mountains and deserts, hands had made it. This is one of the oldest forms of globalization, not the full knowledge of the other, but the presence of the other in daily life through things. A silk sleeve, a glass bowl, a spice scent, a foreign coin, a translated story, each says that the world is larger than the town that holds it. Luxury goods had special power because they compressed distance into touch. Silk could be held against the skin. Pepper could be tasted. Incense could fill a room. A jewel could catch light in a palace far from the mine where it formed. The senses made geography intimate. A ruler might not understand the people who produced a luxury, but his body could enjoy the result. That pleasure helped sustain the risks and costs of long-distance trade. Religious objects worked differently, but just as powerfully. A small Buddhist image carried by a traveler could become the center of devotion in a distant place. A manuscript could be copied until the original route was forgotten. A relic could sanctify a monastery. A cross carved in China could testify to a community whose descendants vanished. Sacred objects travel because faith gives matter a second life. The Silk Roads were also roads of memory after they ceased to dominate trade. Later states looked back on them and found prestige. Modern tourism, archaeology, national heritage, museum exhibitions, and political rhetoric have all revived the Silk Roads in different forms. Countries along the routes claim connection to a shared past. Cities restore monuments. Museums display fragments under the glow of global history. Rail lines and pipelines borrow the old language of caravans. The name has become a resource, but the old roads should not be turned into a myth of perfect harmony. They were not a peaceful multicultural dream untouched by power. They included conquest, slavery, disease, taxation, cultural destruction, religious conflict, and environmental hardship. Their greatness lies not in innocence, but in complexity. They show that human beings have always sought connection, even when connection was costly and morally mixed. The Silk Roads also show that isolation is often an illusion. A civilization may imagine itself self-contained, but its horses, crops, art, metals, books, diseases, religious vocabulary, and technologies may all reveal otherwise. Borders matter politically, but culture leaks through them. A ruler can close a gate for a time, but desire, necessity, and curiosity keep looking for another entrance. The end of a route does not mean the end of influence. When oceanic trade expanded and overland routes lost some of their importance, the centuries of earlier exchange remained embedded in societies. Paper did not disappear. Buddhism did not leave China. Islam did not leave Central Asia. Mathematical notation did not return to its source. Artistic forms did not unwind themselves. Once an idea has been adopted deeply, its road can vanish and the idea can remain. The Silk Roads therefore ask us to think about history not as a series of separate civilizations rising and falling in isolation, but as a moving field of contact. Rome mattered. China mattered. India mattered. Persia mattered. The Islamic world mattered. Central Asia mattered. The steppe mattered. The sea mattered. No single center explains the whole. The whole is in the movement. This is why a caravan at dawn can stand for so much. It is small enough to imagine and large enough to contain the world. Men tightening ropes around bales of silk are also tightening links between empires. A camel taking its first step into the desert is part of a chain that may end in a Roman banquet, a Chinese cavalry stable, a Buddhist monastery, an Abbasid library, a Venetian counting house, or a village changed by plague. The caravan does not know its consequences. History rarely does. The same is true of a ship leaving an Indian Ocean port with a monsoon. Its sailors know winds, cargo, reefs, and stars. They do not know that future historians will place them inside a system of global exchange. They are trying to arrive alive, make money, honor obligations, and return when the winds allow. World history is often made by people doing immediate things for immediate reasons. That may be the most human truth of the Silk Roads. They were vast, but they were not abstract to those who lived them. To one person, the road was a debt. To another, a pilgrimage. To another, exile. To another, military command. To another, marriage. To another, hunger. To another, salvation. To another, a chance to become rich. The same road could be hope and danger depending on who walked it. At night in a caravanserai, after the gate closed, the world might briefly gather in one courtyard. Animals breathing, men speaking softly over accounts, someone praying, someone coughing, someone guarding a locked chest, someone listening for trouble outside the walls. The stars overhead would be the same stars seen from China, India, Persia, Arabia, and the Mediterranean, but each traveler named them differently. The sky was shared. Meaning was translated. In the morning, the gate would open. Some travelers would turn east, some west, some south toward India, some north toward the steppe. News would split with them. Rumors would mutate. Prices would change. A text would continue in a saddlebag. A disease might continue in a flea. A new word would continue in someone's mouth. The road existed because departure repeated itself. To follow the Silk Roads, then, is to follow repeated departure. Zhang Qian leaving the Han court, a monk leaving Kutcha, a merchant leaving Samarkand, a sailor leaving Calicut, a papermaker leaving one workshop for another, a family leaving an oasis because war has come too close, a plague leaving one host for the next, a story leaving the place where it was first told. No one controlled all of it. That is part of its wonder. Empires rose along the roads and tried to shape them. The Han, Kushans, Sasanians, Tang, Abbasids, Turks, Tibetans, Mongols, Timurids, Ottomans, and many others each held pieces. But the network was larger than any ruler's plan. It belonged to geography, appetite, fear, and imagination as much as to states. In the end, the Silk Roads are not remembered because they were efficient. Often they were not. They were slow, expensive, risky, and uncertain. They are remembered because they show how much human beings were willing to risk for connection before connection became easy. A message could take months. A journey could take years. A mistake could kill. Still, people went. They went because somewhere beyond the horizon there were horses, markets, monasteries, patrons, spices, books, safety, profit, or truth. They went because the known world was not enough. They went because distance is frightening, but it is also an invitation. There is another way to enter this history, through the objects that survived. A piece of silk found in a tomb can preserve the pressure of a loom and the imagination of a pattern maker who never expected to be known. A glass cup buried far from the furnace that made it can show admiration traveling farther than language. A wooden document from a desert fort can preserve a tax record more faithfully than a royal boast. A painted banner folded away in a cave can carry the color of devotion across a millennium. Objects do not tell the whole truth, but they resist forgetting in ways human memory cannot. Silk itself is a strange survivor. It is delicate, yet under the right conditions it can outlive dynasties. In dry tombs and sealed chambers, fragments remain, faded, torn, sometimes no larger than a hand, but still carrying motifs of animals, clouds, flowers, pearls, riders, or sacred figures. A textile is never only decoration. It is agriculture, insect life, women's work, dye chemistry, trade, taste, status, and touch all woven together. When a piece of silk crosses a continent, all of those things cross with it. Glass is equally revealing. Roman glass fascinated Eastern elites because it made light behave differently. A transparent or translucent vessel could seem almost magical in cultures where other materials dominated luxury. Glass moved, but so did the desire to imitate it. Chinese artisans developed their own responses to foreign glass, sometimes valuing it as exotic, sometimes adapting its forms. The movement of an object can create not just consumption but experiment. Jade moved in the opposite direction through deep Chinese desire. Khotan, at the southern edge of the Darim Basin, was one of the great sources of jade prized by Chinese elites. Jade was not simply beautiful. It carried ritual, moral, and aristocratic associations. It was linked to purity, durability, and cultivated virtue. The movement of jade from Central Asian riverbeds into Chinese ritual and courtly life shows that the Silk Roads were not only about the West wanting China. China wanted the West in its own way, through stone, horses, music, fruit, and sacred texts. Fruit trees and garden plants changed landscapes more quietly than silk changed wardrobes. Grapes, pomegranates, walnuts, peaches, apricots, melons, and other crops moved across Eurasia in complicated patterns over long centuries. Some had multiple centers of cultivation. Some traveled with conquest, some with monks, some with farmers, some with merchants. In a garden, the Silk Roads became edible. A fruit on a table could contain the history of migration so old that no one eating it remembered it had once been foreign. Tea also belongs to the later history of these routes. It began as a Chinese product and practice, but over time it moved into Tibetan, Central Asian, Mongol, Russian, Islamic, and eventually European worlds, changing with each adoption. In Tibet and the steppe, tea mixed with butter, milk, and salt became nourishment as well as drink. In other places, it became ceremony, medicine, hospitality, or commerce. A leaf can become a road when enough people decide they need it. Horses, unlike silk and tea, moved with their own will. They resisted, tired, panicked, reproduced, and died. The horse trade connected ecology to empire. Steppe and oasis breeders understood animals in ways bureaucrats could only purchase. Chinese demand for Western horses drew the Han state towards Central Asia. Later empires, from Turks to Mongols, depended on the mobility horses made possible. A horse is not an object, but in Silk Road history it can function like a strategic commodity. It carries bodies, weapons, messages, and power. The road changed animals too. Camels became associated with long-distance trade so strongly that the image of a caravan can almost obscure the people who managed it. Yet camel drivers possessed specialized knowledge. They knew temperament, load balance, injuries, desert pacing, and the small signs of exhaustion. A wealthy merchant might own the goods, but the drivers often knew whether the goods would survive the journey. Practical expertise rarely receives the same honor as capital, but without it, capital remains motionless. Weights and measures were another invisible challenge. A merchant moving from one region to another faced different units, currencies, taxes, laws, and expectations. An agreement valid in one city might not be recognized in another. Quality had to be judged. Fraud had to be detected. Translators had to be trusted. Even the meaning of a promise could differ between communities. The Silk Roads required not only courage, but systems of comparison. Trade creates mathematics because trade needs equivalence. Credit made distance more manageable. Carrying all wealth and visible goods was dangerous. Trust networks allowed merchants to settle accounts across space, to rely on partners, to use letters of introduction, family firms, or community ties. This was not modern banking, but it was sophisticated. Ancient and medieval commerce did not lack intelligence. It lacked some modern instruments, but it compensated with reputation, kinship, religion, and repeated exchange. A merchant's good name could be as valuable as a camel load of silk. Law followed trade. Rulers understood that commerce brought revenue. They built roads, guarded stations, standardized some taxes, issued permits, punished banditry when it suited them, and extracted profit whenever possible. A safe road was rarely free. Protection and taxation grew together. The traveler paid because danger had a price, and so did safety. Bandits appear often in stories because they represented the obvious danger of the road, but official extraction could be just as burdensome. A caravan might face tolls at river crossings, city gates, mountain passes, and political borders. A ruler who taxed too heavily could drive trade elsewhere. A ruler who taxed too lightly might lack funds to protect the route. Silk Road governance required balance, and not every state managed it well. Environmental change also mattered. Rivers shifted. Irrigation systems failed or were neglected. Deserts expanded or contracted at local scales. A city dependent on water could decline if canals silted, warfare damaged maintenance, or political authority weakened. The ruins of Central Asia are often ruins of water management as much as politics. An oasis is a human agreement with geography. If the agreement breaks, the city can fade into dust. Merv offers a powerful example of greatness and fragility. At its height, it was among the major cities of the Islamic world, rich in learning, agriculture, and trade. Its location made it a hinge between Iran, Central Asia, and the steppe. But cities that sit at crossroads are also exposed to armies. The Mongol destruction of Merv in the 13th century became one of the most infamous catastrophes of the conquest. Numbers in medieval sources may be exaggerated, but the devastation was real. The road that brings wealth can also bring the force that destroys wealth. Samarkand survived destruction by being remade. Timur transformed it into an imperial capital, drawing artisans from conquered lands. Its architecture became a deliberate statement. The ruler who controlled movement could gather the skills of the world into one city. The blue domes and tiled portals of Timurid Samarkand are therefore not only beautiful, they are political. They say that conquest can turn mobility into display. Bokhara became a different kind of monument, a city of learning, piety, and commercial depth. Its madrasas, mosques, bazaars, and scholarly reputations made it one of the great centers of Central Asian Islam. A student arriving there might encounter legal debates, theological instruction, poetry, trade, and the rhythms of urban life shaped by centuries of movement. Knowledge did not float above the marketplace. It lived beside it. Kashgar, at the western edge of the Darim Basin, had the feeling of a hinge. Routes from China, Central Asia, the Pamirs, and the southern deserts converged there. A traveler might arrive from the east with Chinese goods, from the west with Persian cloth, from the south with Indian products, from the north with steppe animals. The city made geography negotiable. It turned mountains and deserts into directions rather than walls. The Darim Basin itself was a world of lost kingdoms. Lulan, Naya, Kucha, Khotan, Turfan, and other centers rose and declined along the edges of desert and water. Some preserved documents in wooden tablets and paper. Some produced Buddhist art and literature. Some shifted languages and religions over time. Many were eventually abandoned or transformed as routes, water systems, and powers changed. The desert, which threatened travelers, also preserved what they left behind. Dryness became an archive. Mummies from the Darim Basin, textiles from graves, documents from abandoned settlements, and paintings from caves have complicated older assumptions about ethnicity, culture, and movement in Inner Asia. The region was never a simple boundary between China and the West. It was a deep zone of mixture, with Indo-European languages, Iranian languages, Turkic languages, Chinese administration, Indian religion, and local identities all present at different times. The Silk Roads did not cross emptiness. They crossed complexity. The maritime world had its own complexities. The monsoon system made the Indian Ocean less a barrier than a seasonal engine. Sailors learned that winds blow one way in one season and reverse in another. This predictability allowed planned voyages across open water. A ship could wait in a port for the right wind, as a caravan might wait for snow to melt in a pass. Time on the Silk Roads was not only measured by distance. It was measured by seasons. The Periplus of the Erythraean Sea, a Greek-language maritime guide from the early centuries CE, shows a world of ports, goods, sailing times, and commercial knowledge linking the Red Sea, East Africa, Arabia, and India. It is not romantic. It is practical. It names places, products, and routes. Such texts remind us that the ancient world contained professionals who understood long-distance commerce in technical terms. They did not need modern maps to possess geographic intelligence. In the Indian Ocean, ships carried bulk and luxury together. Pepper could move in quantity. Ceramics could be packed by the thousands. Incense from South Arabia, ivory from East Africa, cotton textiles from India, pearls from the Gulf, horses shipped by sea, and ceramics from China all entered maritime circuits. Ports were cosmopolitan because ships concentrate strangers. A harbor is a market made of arrivals. The Swahili coast of East Africa belongs to this wider story. Its towns participated in Indian Ocean trade, linking African gold, ivory, timber, and other products with Arabia, Persia, India, and beyond. Islam traveled there by sea, and coastal culture developed from African foundations in contact with the wider oceanic world. This shows again why the Silk Roads cannot be reduced to China and Europe. Africa was part of the connected system too. Southeast Asia was equally important. The straits and islands between India and China controlled maritime movement. Malay, Javanese, and other Southeast Asian communities served as intermediaries, producers, sailors, and political powers in their own right. Spices from islands far east of India became objects of desire in the Mediterranean and Middle East, passing through many hands before reaching distant tables. The smell of cloves in one civilization could depend on sailors from another world entirely. China's maritime trade grew especially important under later dynasties. Ports such as Guangzhou and Xuanzhou became homes to foreign merchants. Mosques, temples, warehouses, and foreign quarters appeared. Maritime trade tied China to the Indian Ocean as surely as caravan routes tied it to Central Asia. The old image of a camel caravan is powerful, but a full history must also hear oars, sails, gulls, harbor bells, and monsoon rain. Porcelain became one of China's great global exports in the medieval and early modern periods. Unlike silk, porcelain was hard, bright, durable, and almost magical to those who did not know how to make it. Islamic potters and later European potters tried to imitate Chinese ceramics, producing beautiful traditions of their own in the process. Desire for an imported object can create local innovation. Failure to copy perfectly can become a new art. The Silk Roads also carried military technologies and tactics, though not always directly or quickly. The stirrup, composite bow traditions, siege techniques, gunpowder, and knowledge of fortification all moved through Eurasian contact zones in complex ways. War is one of the most efficient transmitters of technology because survival rewards adoption. A weapon seen on one frontier may appear on another generations later, modified by local needs. Gunpowder began in China as an alchemical discovery and eventually transformed warfare across Eurasia. Its movement westward was not a single caravan event, but a long process involving texts, craftsmen, warfare, Mongol connections, and Islamic and European experimentation. By the time gunpowder weapons reshaped late medieval and early modern warfare, the old Silk Road world had already helped create the conditions for such knowledge to travel. The compass also moved within the broader history of navigation and exchange. Magnetic knowledge developed in China and later became part of maritime navigation across the Indian Ocean, Islamic world, and Europe. The sea routes that eventually reduced the overland Silk Road's dominance were themselves made possible by accumulated navigation knowledge, some of it transmitted across the connected world the old routes had helped build. In that sense, the Silk Roads helped create the technologies that would transform them. Printing followed a similarly complicated path. Woodblock printing flourished in East Asia, especially for Buddhist texts and later secular works. Movable type appeared in China and Korea before Gutenberg, though with different technological and linguistic contexts. European printing developed under its own conditions, but the broader story of paper, block printing, ink, and book culture belongs to Afro-Eurasian exchange. The movement of paper westward made later revolutions in communication easier. A technology may need another technology to become world-changing. The Silk Roads reshaped time as well as space. Calendars, astronomical tables, religious festivals, market seasons, sailing seasons, and imperial postal schedules all structured movement. A merchant could not ignore the monsoon. A caravan could not ignore winter passes. A pilgrim might time travel around religious observances. An empire might send orders through relay stations. Connection depended on timing, and timing required knowledge. Astronomers across Eurasia looked at the same sky but built different systems to explain it. Islamic astronomers inherited and critiqued Greek models, drew on Indian mathematics, and made observations that later influenced Europe. Chinese astronomers maintained court records of comets, eclipses, and celestial events. Indian astronomers developed mathematical astronomy of great sophistication. The connected world allowed tables, instruments, and ideas to be compared. The sky became another road. Medicine also traveled. Drugs, herbs, minerals, diagnostic ideas, and medical texts moved between India, China, Persia, the Islamic world, and the Mediterranean. Some remedies worked. Some did not. Some were translated into new frameworks. A plant valued in one medical tradition might be renamed and reinterpreted in another. The search for healing is one of the strongest motives for exchange because illness makes people willing to try what is foreign. The road carried stories with even greater ease. Fables, saints' lives, miracle tales, animal stories, heroic cycles, and moral parables moved across languages. The same narrative pattern might appear in India, Persia, Arabic literature, and Europe with changing names and lessons. Stories are like cargo. They can travel in memory, adapt to local taste, and survive without a written text. A merchant telling a tale by firelight may be as important to cultural transmission as a scholar translating a book. The movement of stories complicates the idea of originality. Many traditions cherish certain tales as their own, and they are their own in the form people know them. But the deep roots of narrative often cross borders. A story can be born in one place, grow in another, and become beloved in a third. The Silk Roads made this possible over and over again. Music, medicine, mathematics, religion, textiles, food, stories, animals, disease, and art all traveled at different speeds. Some things moved in days, some in years, some over centuries. A spice could cross faster than a religious system. A motif could move without its meaning. A technology could arrive before the social conditions needed to transform it. The Silk Roads were not a single current. They were many currents flowing at once. One of the most haunting aspects of this history is how much has been lost. Most travelers did not leave accounts. Most women, laborers, camel drivers, sailors, translators, and enslaved people passed without written memorial. Many cities are ruins. Many languages vanished. Many documents remain unread. Many objects were looted from their contexts, making them harder to understand even when they survive in museums. The Silk Roads we know are only the illuminated edge of a much larger darkness. Even the famous collections carry complicated histories. The manuscripts and artworks of Dunhuang are now scattered across institutions in China, Britain, France, Russia, Japan, and elsewhere because early 20th century explorers removed vast quantities from the caves. Their work preserved and publicized materials, but it also took them from their place of origin under unequal conditions. Modern scholarship must live with that tension, gratitude for survival and knowledge, discomfort at extraction. The Silk Roads continue to raise questions about ownership, memory, and power. Modern museums can reunite objects intellectually through catalogs and digital projects, but the physical dispersal remains part of the story. A manuscript copied near Dunhuang may now be read in London. A banner painted for a Buddhist cave may hang far from the desert. A fragment once devotional becomes art historical evidence. Objects migrate again, this time through empire, archaeology, collecting, and scholarship. The road did not end when caravans faded. It changed into museum routes, academic routes, digital routes. The modern romance of the Silk Road often prefers camel bells to colonial excavation, but both belong to how the past reached us. The phrase Silk Road itself was shaped by modern scholarship and imperial-era exploration. European, Russian, Chinese, Japanese, and other scholars mapped, collected, named, and interpreted the routes through their own ambitions and assumptions. The past is never received untouched. It is recovered through the desires of those who search for it. Still, the wonder remains. There are few historical subjects that so powerfully break the illusion of separateness. A Christian text in Chinese, an Indian Buddhist idea painted in a Chinese cave with Central Asian features, a Roman glass bowl in an Eastern tomb, a Sogdian letter in a Chinese watchtower, a Persian motif on Chinese silk, an Arabic mathematical text carrying Indian numerals toward Europe. Each is a small refusal of isolation. The Silk Roads teach that the world has been connected for a very long time, but not in the same way everywhere and not with equal power for everyone. Some people moved freely, others were moved by force. Some profited, others suffered. Some ideas flourished, others were suppressed. Some cities grew rich, others were destroyed. The beauty of connection cannot be separated from its inequalities. This is why the Silk Roads still feel modern. We also live in a world where goods travel farther than the people who buy them understand, where disease can move along networks built for prosperity, where technologies invented in one place transform life in another, where cultures borrow constantly while arguing about identity, and where powerful states wrap infrastructure in historical language. The forms have changed. The dilemmas have not. A container ship is not a camel caravan, but it performs an old function. A data cable is not a desert road, but it carries value across distance. A passport is not a Mongol pesa, but it grants movement under authority. A global supply chain is not a Sogdian family network, but it depends on trust, enforcement, risk, and reputation. The modern world did not invent connection. It accelerated it. Yet acceleration changes the emotional texture. A message that once took months now crosses the world instantly. A purchase that once required danger now requires a click. We have gained speed, but perhaps lost some awareness of distance. The Silk Roads remind us that connection was once felt in the body, in thirst, cold, saddle sores, seasickness, mountain breathlessness, and the anxiety of waiting for a caravan overdue by weeks. That bodily knowledge gave distance moral weight. To receive something from far away was to receive the result of risk. Today, distance is often hidden inside logistics. The Silk Roads make distance visible again. They ask us to imagine the hands, animals, winds, roads, ports, contracts, prayers, and losses behind every object that crosses the world. The ancient traveler did not have our maps, but sometimes he may have understood dependence more clearly than we do. He knew the next well mattered. He knew the guide mattered. He knew the health of animals mattered. He knew weather mattered. He knew politics mattered. He knew trust mattered. A connected world is fragile because it depends on many things working that no single person controls. This fragility is one reason the Silk Roads could flourish in one century and weaken in another. When strong states protected routes, trade expanded. When war broke corridors, trade shifted. When plague struck, movement became deadly. When seas became easier than deserts, merchants followed ships. The road was never guaranteed. It had to be remade constantly by circumstance and choice. And yet, despite everything, people kept remaking it. That persistence is perhaps more remarkable than any single object. Across 15 centuries and more, through changing empires and religions, through conquests and pandemics, through deserts and storms, human beings continued to move things and meanings across Eurasia. They did not do so because they believed in global harmony. They did so because need, profit, faith, curiosity, and ambition are powerful enough to overcome fear, at least for some. The story returns, finally, to the quiet before departure. A caravan waiting at an oasis does not look like world history. It looks like tired animals, bundled cargo, men checking straps, a cook putting out a fire, a guard scanning the road, a merchant counting losses before they happen. But within those ordinary acts lies the structure of a connected world. Great transformations often begin not with a proclamation, but with someone deciding that the next dangerous stage is worth attempting. One more feature of the Silk Roads deserves attention. They changed how people imagine value. In a village, value might be measured by land, harvest, animals, tools, and kinship. Along the Silk Roads, value became portable and comparative. A small object could be worth more than a cart of grain if it had crossed enough distance and carried enough rarity. A spice that grew in one humid island could become a treasure in a cold inland court. A textile that required specialized knowledge could become a diplomatic gift. A horse bred in one valley could alter the ambitions of an emperor. Distance itself became part of price. This meant that ignorance could be profitable. The farther a consumer was from a product's source, the more mystery surrounded it, and mystery could raise value. Roman buyers did not need to understand silkworms to desire silk. Chinese patrons did not need to know the furnace techniques of Roman glassmakers to prize glass. Medieval Europeans did not need accurate knowledge of the Spice Islands to pay dearly for spices. The unknown can be turned into luxury. At the same time, the Silk Roads slowly reduced ignorance. Each transaction carried bits of information. A merchant learned that a route was blocked. A monk learned that a monastery existed beyond a pass. A sailor learned that a certain port had good water but corrupt officials. A ruler learned that a distant kingdom possessed horses, silver, or skilled artisans. Knowledge moved in fragments, and fragments accumulated. No one possessed the whole world, but many people possessed pieces of it. This fragmented knowledge shaped maps. Pre-modern maps often mixed measurement, mythology, political worldview, and practical memory. Some maps were made for administration, some for pilgrimage, some for scholarship, some for symbolic order. The Silk Roads encouraged broader horizons because contact demanded orientation. Even when maps were inaccurate, their expansion mattered. To draw a distant place is to admit that it belongs somewhere in the same world. The roads also changed imagination through comparison. A traveler who saw another court could compare ceremonies. A monk who read another philosophy could compare doctrines. A merchant who visited another market could compare prices and laws. Comparison is quietly revolutionary. It teaches that one's own customs are not the only possible customs. That knowledge can produce admiration, anxiety, reform, imitation, or rejection. The Silk Roads did not create tolerance automatically, but they made ignorance harder to preserve. Some travelers returned changed. Others returned more convinced of their own civilization's superiority. Contact does not always soften prejudice. Sometimes it sharpens it. Greek and Roman writers could admire Eastern luxury while condemning it. Chinese officials could value foreign horses while distrusting foreign customs. Muslim geographers could describe distant peoples with curiosity and judgment together. The Silk Roads increased knowledge, but knowledge and humility do not always travel together. This tension gives the history its texture. The same road could carry Buddhist compassion and military intelligence, mathematical clarity and racist caricature, sacred relics and enslaved people, healing herbs and epidemic disease. Human connection is never made of one moral substance. It is a braid of motives. The environmental cost also deserves a quiet place in the story. Oasis agriculture required careful management. Irrigation could create abundance, but also salinization, conflict over water, and vulnerability to neglect. Herds needed pasture. Caravan animals consumed fodder. Cities needed fuel. Expanding trade could enrich communities, but it could also pressure fragile landscapes. The Silk Roads were not modern industrial systems, but they still depended on extraction from land, animals, and labor. Every road leaves marks. The desert preserves some marks and erases others. Wooden slips survive where damp climates would have destroyed them. Painted caves retain colors where human settlement has disappeared. Footprints vanish in sand, but a lost letter may endure. This uneven preservation shapes our emotional response. We can read a merchant's anxiety, but not hear the song he sang while traveling. We can see a painted donor, but not know the smell of the room where the donation was negotiated. The past gives fragments, then asks imagination to move carefully between them. Careful imagination is the key. The Silk Roads are too beautiful to be left as myth and too important to be reduced to economics. They require both wonder and discipline. Wonder sees the caravan under stars. Discipline remembers tax records, disease, and the fact that most goods moved in stages rather than by heroic single journeys. Wonder sees Duanhuang's painted heavens. Discipline remembers the abandoned woman in a Sogdian letter. Wonder sees Marco Polo at the court of Kublai Khan. Discipline remembers that countless Asian merchants had crossed these worlds long before his name became famous in Europe. This balance is what makes the subject suitable for the quiet hours. The Silk Roads do not demand a single battle scene or a single emperor. They invite slow attention. They ask us to follow threads. A thread may begin with a silkworm, pass through a loom, a merchant's account, a camel load, an oasis tax office, a Persian broker, a Roman household, and a moralist complaint. Another thread may begin with a monk's vow and end as a painted paradise in a cave. Another begins with a flea and ends with church bells tolling over plague-stricken towns. The roads are therefore a lesson in consequences. No traveler could see the whole chain. Zhang Qian could not see Marco Polo. A Sogdian merchant could not see the Portuguese ships that would later change global trade. A monk copying a sutra at Dunhuang could not see the modern scholar unrolling it on a screen. But history is made of actions whose consequences exceed the imagination of those who perform them. The Silk Roads also remind us that civilization is not only built in capitals. Ports matter, but so do in between places. Border towns, caravanserais, ports, translation centers, watchtowers, mountain passes, and desert monasteries often do more to connect worlds than palaces do. The margins of one empire can become the center of world history when viewed from another scale. Dunhuang, Kashgar, and Samarkand were not margins to the people who lived there. They were centers of their own maps. A final image remains, not the whole road, because the whole road cannot be seen, but a single exchange in a market. A merchant opens a bundle. Inside is silk, folded tight against dust. Another man touches it, tests the weave, asks where it came from, and receives an answer that is partly true, partly vague, partly designed to raise the price. Nearby, a monk asks for directions to a monastery. A camel groans as its load is shifted. A scribe sharpens a reed. A child watches a foreigner and remembers the shape of his hat. A guard at the gate counts animals. A woman in a courtyard hears a language she does not know and understands from tone alone that someone is bargaining hard. Nothing in that scene announces itself as the making of world history. Yet world history is there. In the cloth, the language, the animal, the account, the road outside the gate, the desire to buy, the willingness to sell, and the knowledge that beyond the desert there is another market waiting. That is the Silk Roads at their most real, not a single shining line across a map, but countless moments of contact, each small enough to be human, together large enough to change the world. There is peace in imagining the road at night, but it is not an empty peace. The animals are tied close because thieves may come. The goods are covered because dust enters everything. The fire is kept low because fuel is precious. Men speak softly because the next day will demand strength. Above them, the sky is clear with the hard brightness of desert stars, the same stars by which sailors far to the south steer ships across the Indian Ocean. Land road and sea road meet in the sky before they meet in markets. Somewhere in the darkness, a bell tied to a camel's neck moves once and stops. Someone wakes, listens, hears nothing dangerous, and sleeps again. In another room, a merchant lies awake, calculating whether the price in the next city will justify the risk of going on. A pilgrim repeats a prayer. A guard thinks of home. The road is not only movement. It is waiting, judging, fearing, hoping, then moving again. By morning, the caravanserai will look ordinary. Swept courtyard, animal dung, ashes, tired faces, packs reopened and tied again. Yet every departure repeats the larger pattern of the Silk Roads. People leave the safety of one known place because another place, not yet reached, has become necessary. This simple act, repeated across centuries, made the ancient world wider than any one empire could hold. And if the road seems quiet from a distance, that quiet is only the sound of scale. A single footstep disappears. A single camel bell fades. A single contract is folded and stored. But thousands of such small acts, repeated by people who did not know one another and often could not speak one another's languages, formed a pattern stronger than any one journey. The Silk Roads were made from repetition, departure after departure, bargain after bargain, translation after translation, prayer after prayer, loss after loss, return after return. That repetition is why the routes endured. The road was never still. Even when one route closed, another was searched for. Even when one city fell, another market began calling travelers onward. That is why the memory of it still breathes. And so we come to the end of tonight's journey along the Silk Roads. We have followed the routes from the Han Court and the western regions to the oasis cities of Central Asia, across deserts and mountains, through caravanserais, ports, monasteries, markets, and courts. We have seen silk, horses, glass, spices, paper, books, numbers, religions, diseases, and stories move through the same connected world. We have watched Sogdian merchants hold distant trade together. Monks carry scriptures across deserts. Sailors trust the monsoon. And empires try to command roads that were always larger than any single ruler. The Silk Roads were not a road. They were a world, dangerous, brilliant, fragile, and transformative. They joined places that had never been truly separate and showed civilizations that distance could be crossed, though never without cost. The camels are quiet now at the edge of the Taklamakan. The stars above the oasis are sharp and cold. Somewhere beyond the dark, another caravan is already moving. Sleep well. Good night.